Well, let me pose a question as we start this podcast. Increasingly donors to nonprofits today are really being more selective in who they give to. They may be increasing their gifts, but it's a smaller number of nonprofits they're giving to. So, what do you think is the most important item your organization could do to build sustainable donor trust over the long haul? Well, we're going to jump into that question today and others. And today, I'm really just delighted to have on the podcast Tammy Kocher. She's the executive director of New Life Family Services right here in the state of Minnesota. And it's one of the oldest, largest, and most comprehensive pregnancy centers in the country. So that's quite an accomplishment. And Tammy is also an active leader in the state of Minnesota, working with other pregnancy center directors to establish just a strong network of support. So, Tammy, thank you for what you do for so many families here, and a delight to have you on the podcast today. So, why don't you just take a moment to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Again, my name is Tammy Kocher, and I have been with New Life Family Services for 25 years. I have been the executive director for almost 17. It was something the Lord called me into that I was not so sure about. And here we are 17 years later, just so grateful for his provision and his calling on my life.
That's so wonderful. And my name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and this is Funding the Future Now podcast. It's really designed for nonprofit leaders, executive roles, but really has broad application into the leadership world. So it's designed to be very practical. The things that Tam and I talk about today, I really believe you'll be able to apply in the things you do. So, Tammy, here's a question for you. It's I'll call it the leadership longevity question. And leading a mission driven organization through cultural headwinds takes more than strategy, as you well know. It goes something deeper. What do you think is the one internal practice or conviction that has kept you grounded and effective in your nonprofit leadership role when the external pressure gets high?
It's a great question. And there are a lot of external pressures that get high around the work that we do. I think, when I felt like God was calling me into this leadership role, my previous executive director, she shared something with me that I thought was really valuable. She said, if God calls you to the executive director role of New Life, you need to do what's best for New Life ahead of what's best for the individuals. And, back then I probably didn't fully understand that, but I think the way that is practically spoken to me over the years is my number one job is to guard our mission. Like God
Mhm.
has entrusted me to lead, which means I need to protect our mission and everything that we do. So it is a filter. And I would say the way that practically works is with our staff team, we regularly talk about our mission, our values, our statement of faith, and how it interplays with what we do. We have Patrick Lencioni he has strategic anchors, which
Yep,
I love him. I'm a big fan of his. And so we
sure.
created strategic anchors into our organization that are based around our mission so that every staff member can make real-time decisions,
Mm,
without having to go up the chain, if you will, if something doesn't quite fit a policy, but it's all centered around our mission. And so I think that's probably the most important thing is just protecting the mission.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love Patrick too.
Yeah.
Quite a unique character.
Love him.
Heard him speak on different occasions, not live, but I love that phrase strategic anchors and the fact that you are regularly connecting with staff. These aren't just some platitudes on a wall in the back office,
Correct.
but you're talking about them. People think about them.
Yes.
And then, like you said, that enables them, it really empowers them to
Yeah.
make wise choices based on those anchors. Well,
Yeah.
that's outstanding. Well, the question in the beginning, we're going to jump into that one now, and it's the donor trust
Mhm.
question. And like I mentioned earlier, donors, I think philanthropic gifts are increasing, but people are being more selective. They're
Sure.
saying, hey, I want my dollars to have a greater impact. And so I'm going to be selective. I'm going to choose who I give to. So, especially in a values driven work, what's the single most important thing your organization does to build and then sustain trust, not for the short haul, but really over the long haul?
Well, I think two things. Number one that comes to mind is transparency. I am a very real person. I'm very transparent in my life in general. And I think that is something that's absolutely necessary for donor relationships. Like building those relationships is key, and they need to know they can trust you. And that means sharing hard things. It means sharing when things are great. It means even being honest when, like, there have been times where our funding was good. And so we didn't do asks because we
Yeah.
didn't need to. But I think being able to build those relationships, you also need longevity. And I think a lot of nonprofits go through a lot of leaders over and over again. And I don't know how you create momentum if you don't have the time to build those relationships. So I
For
think
sure.
transparency, but then also longevity of leaders is really key to be able to grow the organization.
Yeah.
I love our donors.
Mm.
They're like the best people in the world.
Sure.
And I think the other thing I would say too that goes along with that is donors are just even really large donors are just people. They are
Hmm.
people that have hopes and dreams and fears and stress and challenges in their lives. And we are privileged to get to be a part of their story of how they're
That's right.
using their gifts to, better the kingdom in our case as a ministry. And I think they're just people and we need to care about people. And it's a
Yeah.
privilege to get to have that relationship with them.
Sure. I love that. I had a donor that gave significantly to our organization over the years, and he said, "I don't want to just hear the good.
Yeah. Right?
Tell me about the things that didn't quite work out the way you'd hoped
Exactly.
to. I know we have plans and we say, this is what we're going to do with these dollars, but there's side winds, things
Right.
that just we can't control it." But he really gave us the
Mm,
freedom. Tell me not only what didn't work out, but tell me how you're going to address that
correct.
situation in the future. So
Yeah.
I love your transparency. That's
Yeah.
great. Well, I'm going to call this the culture building question. Nonprofits live and die by the strength of their team culture. So, especially when our work is emotionally intense, we're working with people that have feelings, they have families, that have life situations, and they bring it with them to the work. How do you cultivate a staff culture that stays both mission focused and personally sustainable?
Yeah. Well, I think, one thing that I learned early on is you can't delegate culture. You can't put somebody else in charge of making sure you have a good culture. As a leader, it is on you 100%, and you need to be always having your hand on the pulse. If you let off for just a minute, it could really have detrimental impact. And
Sure.
so I think, one, you can't delegate it. But secondly, I think the mindset that I have viewed leadership in and all the work that we get to do is as a Christian ministry, our faith is very important to the work we do. And I know that God has called me to this, and it's a privilege to get to do what I do every day.
Sure.
God doesn't need us. He could find somebody far more capable than Tammy Kocher to lead this organization. Lots of people have way more strengths and skill sets than I do,
Right.
but He has allowed me to be a part of this. And I think and I do talk to the staff about this all the time. It's a privilege that we get to be a part of these stories. People are
Yes.
entrusting their lives and their stories with us. We get to be
Mm.
a part of building families. We get to be a part of strengthening families. We get to be a part of helping those who are hurting from previous decisions or life circumstances. We get to help them with the love of Christ. And
Right.
we should never take for granted what a privilege it is that we get to do that. And so that's a big part, I think, of the culture at New Life that I want to create is that it's so important and it's good. But I would say with that, we also will use kind of culture questions in our interview process. Like we want to make sure that we're finding people that are going to be a good fit for our culture. And so even practically speaking too of kind of my top things is I don't want like as important as our jobs are, and I just talked about what a privilege it is that we get to do this. At the end of the day, it's also a job. It's not my entire life. And
For
so
sure.
I want people that can have balance in their life, that they understand they work hard, they do all the things that God has called them to do, and they put everything into it. But then they go home at the end of the day and they can be off and they can be with their families. They can enjoy their life. I take my vacations. I feel like that's really important to model for our staff.
Mm.
I want them to take breaks. I want them to take their vacations.
Sure.
So that's an important cultural piece for me personally. And I think another one that's important is accountability, owning your mistakes. Again, it goes back to the transparency, right? Like I make mistakes every day, but we need to own them. And I want people who are real and are going to, I don't want people who are going to hide mistakes or anything like that. So that's another cultural piece. And so we get at those through interview questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. When you talked about donors, I'll just use the word for us in nonprofit leaders to be donor centric.
Hmm.
And so You talked about transparency. I just love that. For me, it's like you're wanting to get your you want to get to know your donor as an individual. What's their
Yes.
family like? What's their
Yes.
situation? They go through life that is trying situations and things don't work
Totally.
out for them. And for
100%.
us just to say, "Oh, you're a transaction, I'm not really interested in that part of your life."
Right.
That just that just takes away so much of what we wanna contribute to that person.
Right.
It's a two-way street. We are receiving so much benefit, but we give benefit back to
Yeah.
them, and the same thing for staff, just like you said, we care for people. I'm just not walking by people's desks and offices and ignoring them.
Right.
I'm engaged in some ways, and so I appreciate the culture that you're
Yeah.
creating there. Sounds though it's a fun culture to be a part of where you've got these kind of values that are so important.
Well, it can be. I mean, I hope it's a fun culture. I mean,
Yeah,
I hope people are joyful and love going to work every day.
yeah,
And I think in addition, our frontline staff they're carrying burdens that our clients are facing. You know what I mean? And so
for sure.
we need to be pouring into them because they're pouring into our clients.
Yeah.
And so we need to be caring, yeah, very much about that.
The next question is what I'm going to call the funding diversification question. And I think sometimes what can happen in nonprofits, regardless of the size, is we become overly dependent on a small number of donor gifts. These tend obviously to be the larger kinds of gifts. What's the most strategic shift your organization has made to build a more, I'm going to call it a resilient and diversified revenue base? And what would you talk to a younger executive director who hasn't tackled that matter yet? What would be your advice to that
I
situation?
mean, I think the first thing is it takes time.
Yeah,
You come into whatever you come into, whether it's, heavy funding on an event or I generally don't see that as strong monthly support. That's not usually where people start. But
right.
I think, so having the variety of options, you need your sustainable monthly givers. I think I want to say it was about 5 years into my role where I finally was like, we should probably try to get monthly donors.
Okay.
Very basic. Nobody told me. And I was like, we should probably try this. So we just
Yeah.
started putting that in everything that we did. And lo and behold, we were able to, gain 874 monthly donors. So
Oh my.
but that
Wow.
takes time. That takes a lot of time, and putting that in every newsletter and every ask or monthly, a tactic you could use that's been really successful are matches for us. But one of the
Okay.
ways we've used matches is actually for monthly. So we have a $50,000 match at our gala, and every new or increased monthly gift for the next 12 months will be matched. So using
Oh,
matches for monthly, I would say, is a
okay.
tactic. It's been something I hadn't thought of, but I think is a great idea.
It is.
Beyond that, I would say relationship. Everything really comes back to relationship. I say relationship beats strategy every time. There's nothing that can replace getting to know your donors, as you talked about, why they care about this issue,
For
why
sure.
they have chosen your organization, why, what is it? And it's not about how much money they have. It's whether what they're passionate about aligns with what you're doing.
For
Like,
sure.
so to me, that's the other thing I would say as you're getting to know your donors. One of the most important aspects of that can be if you get to know them and you have that relationship with them, that's where you can change your timing. So for us, we had very cyclical giving. A lot of nonprofits do, right? Summers are terrible. Top of the year is good. We have a gala and then end of year giving is great. Well, back a long time ago, we would go in the negative in the summers. And so we
Right.
had people who were giving generous gifts, but I finally was like, I know you care deeply about us. Instead of giving at our gala, would you be willing to give that in June
Okay.
so that we're not going so negative? And they're like, of course. It doesn't matter
Sure.
to them. So I think knowing your donors can be really key for allowing for timing, but also like in case of emergency, if you're really desperate, getting to know
Mm,
that you can call and say, here's our
sure.
situation, goes back to the transparency. But then also those are the people you can go to for, large mission forward things that you're trying to raise money for.
Mhm.
But you have to know people, know what their passions are, why they give, and yes, to some degree, what their capacity is. But also, you just have to be able to align that with your mission and know how to do that. But that
Yeah.
comes through relationship.
Sure. And like you said, that just takes time. I know I worked with a foundation years ago. I've been at this current organization for 23 years. So this was probably, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. We worked with them for 8 years before there was a gift. And
Yeah.
then it was a very significant gift over 6 years period of time.
Right.
But they had a lot of questions, and they were legitimate
For
questions
sure.
about our financial structure and our process. In fact, it was really quite interesting. At one point, we invited them in to help us think strategy wise, because that was some of the giftings they
Yes.
had. And they really offered some very good insights
Mhm.
that were helpful, that showed to them that we were listening to them. It wasn't just a one way street. So, yeah, it does take time, and you just need to have a willingness to be patient
Yep.
and realize that it's not on our time, it's on their time that things can happen. So,
Yeah.
love that. I'm going to go to what I call the Fast Five, and I ask every guest these questions. They're not related to personally what you do work wise, but just more how you do life. So here's the
Okay.
first question. What's the best piece, maybe a great piece of professional advice you've received?
I think probably one of my favorite things goes to what we were just talking about, which is for fundraising, is as a Christian ministry, we have one donor.
Yeah.
And our donor is the Lord. Our job is to figure out who he wants to give through. But at the end of the day, if we are aligned with his mission and where he's calling us to go, he is the one to provide for us. And I think that's probably one of the most transformative pieces of advice that I've ever had. And I continue to share that with people because I think it relieves us from the pressure of, having to figure it all out. As a matter of fact, I mean, I could probably be on here for days telling you of all the stories.
Right.
We were raising a capital campaign, $4.5 million. And we were like 2 months from opening and we still needed $1.7 million. And the
Mm,
Lord just out of nowhere,
yeah.
literally out of nowhere. I mean, I was praying. I was like, Lord, I've done everything I know how to do. I got
Sure.
nothing left. And I
Yeah.
feel like he was like, "Good job. You're cute. Now step aside and let me show you what I can do." And
Uh,
we ended up with an $850,000 match to close out our funding for it, and
oh
it was
my goodness.
insane. And
Yeah.
it was just we have one donor, and we
Sure.
just have to do our best to honor him and know
Yeah.
what he's calling us to do.
What a great piece of advice to offer to a new executive director.
Yeah,
You have one donor.
you do.
That's great. Well, second question, what's a daily habit you cannot
Mhm.
live without?
Yeah. I have a Spotify playlist. It's called Morning Battle. And it is
Right.
all my favorite Christian songs that, like, gear me up for the day, and so
Good
I either
deal.
play it while I'm getting ready or on my way to work, or sometimes both.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Get an extra shot on the way to work.
Yep, I need it.
That's so good. If you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self
Mm,
something, like some advice,
yeah.
what would you say to that young, perhaps you were a college student or aspiring young individual?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question a lot, actually. I think I would first tell myself to chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm a high energy person, and,
Right.
I was new in the faith back then, but I think what I would say is God is going to be with you every step of the way, and everything that makes you who you are, sometimes that's too much for other people, but it's not, it's just enough. It's what God has created you to be, and he's going to use that in your future. The things that maybe are weird personality quirks, he can use that for his glory, and he will be with you and to step out in faith.
Yeah, love it. Well, we're gonna build on that, talking about using everything we face in this next
Mm,
question. I want you to think about it was a challenging time you went through. Maybe it was a failure, but however you look at it. But I want you to flip it to the other side. And what success or what good came out of, we'll call it a negative experience or a very strong
failure.
learning experience?
This is one of my favorite questions during interviews.
Yeah, really.
It really is. It gets to the transparency part. I've made lots of mistakes at work over the years, lots and lots of costly mistakes. I think in the spirit of full transparency, I'll tell you a really embarrassing situation.
Okay.
I used to work for a local county government and I was much younger back then. I was up for a promotion and I didn't get a coworker and I both interviewed for this promotion and they ended up hiring somebody from the outside. I
Okay.
was really upset and I fired off an email to the powers that be and, just like, what a slap in the face. I mean, so embarrassing that I did
Sure.
this. But what a slap in the face, whatever. And I got clocked. And
Okay.
I mean, I got called up into an office and I got clocked, and it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was
Yeah.
like what it showed me, which we all have to learn this, I know, and unfortunately we learn it younger when we think we know everything, was you're not all that. You know 10% of an issue. You have to trust your leadership. 10%, and if you knew the other 90%, things would look a whole lot different.
Mm. Yes.
And I think being in the chair that I sit in now, I feel that from the other side constantly. Now I try
Sure.
to be more gracious. I
Yeah.
don't just clock people, but you just have to take it on the chin a little bit and just know, you think staff think one thing and they just don't know the whole story, and we should be gracious and kind. But I think it also taught me to trust leadership. And I think that's been an invaluable lesson for me. So
Thank you for being
it was a little painful.
transparent. Thank you for being transparent on that one. And the last question is, where's your favorite place on earth to disconnect and recharge it? It may be in your backyard, it may be somewhere else.
It's the beach. Always the
Oh,
beach.
yeah.
If I could live at the beach, I would want to live at the beach. That's my happy place.
There's something so refreshing about just the air and listening to the waves and enjoying,
Just
obviously, the
beautiful.
sunshine. Yeah, so good. Well, Tammy, what a delight to have you as a guest on the podcast today and just to hear you speak from your heart in a very open, frank way about something you're extremely passionate about. Why don't you just take a few moments as we wrap up the podcast today and talk to a little bit to people about what you do and how they can connect with you?
Yeah. So if I could give just a quick overview of who New Life is, if this is something
Yeah,
you're passionate about.
please do.
We started in 1973 as a way to offer help and hope to those facing an unplanned pregnancy. We do that through three areas. One, we're a licensed adoption agency serving both birth families and adoptive families all the way through the process. Our second program is we have 6 first care pregnancy centers where we serve those facing an unplanned pregnancy. So we do pregnancy testing, ultrasounds, decision-making counseling, STI testing and treatment. And we have our largest program is our Every Family Parenting program, where we walk alongside families till the youngest child's age 5. And our
Nice.
third program is our Conquerors Abortion Recovery program for those who are hurting from a past abortion. It's a biblically based program offering hope and healing to those who are hurting. And you can
Wonderful.
find us online, newlifefamilyservices.org or nlfs.org.
Perfect. And I've never revealed this before in a podcast, but my wife and I are adoptive parents, and it's brought so much joy into our life. So
Well,
thank you for what you do for so many people and really changing the trajectory of that child's life and then obviously the family's life. Well, it's such a delight having Tammy today. And again, this is Funding the Future Now podcast. My name is Dr. Randy Dirks, and we put these out every week, a couple times a week. You'll find them on your favorite podcast channels and also on YouTube. And we just welcome you back for another episode in the future. So bye for now.